It's already possible to get 3D printed food, and you've probably seen molecular gastronomy pop up in your Facebook feed. But how will we eat in the future, and how will we feed the world's ever-growing population? I'm joined by three knowledgeable people from AUT, and I've asked them to tell us their favourite thing to cook or to eat.
I'm Owen Young, AUT University. My favourite food to eat is probably one made by my wife. It's scalloped potatoes. It's you've got to make it, scallop them, slice them all up, cook them slowly, and you've got to use whole cream milk. That's absolutely fundamental. And then you have Parmesan cheese on the top, and then you put it in the oven and sort of give it death for, half an hour or something, and bring it out and have it with something else. Stunning.
We're all going to finish this very hungry.
I'm Karen Zinn from Sport and Recreation School at AUT, and I'm a dietitian. And my favourite dish would have to be, without a doubt, some sort of lamb. So probably lamb cutlets, served on some kumara mash with some buttered asparagus when I can get it. And if there's no asparagus, there's got to be some sort of green there, done with lots of butter, salt and pepper.
I'm Tracy Burno. I'm from the School of Culture and Society at AUT, and I would have to say my favourite food in the world, and my family would agree with this, popcorn with butter with Tabasco sauce through it. So don't judge, try it. It's amazing.
That sounds amazing. Yes, I'm not going to judge at all. That sounds excellent. Okay, so the interesting thing about that, Owen, is that you all mentioned things that are delicious. Absolutely. Things that are tasty and have interesting textures and feel good to eat and would make you feel nice about eating them. Right. Is the future of food that, or is the future of the food some kind of pill that we pop in the morning and it gives us all the nutrients we need for the day and then we're done?
No, I think the short answer for the pill is no. Look, we've had how many hundreds of millions of years of cultural evolution. Are we going to throw away, in a space of 20 years, all that culture of eating together and enjoying the flavour of food? And we've got taste buds and flavour sensors in our nose, of course, that are just absolutely fundamental to satisfaction. If you have a what's called anosmia and you can't eat, you can't smell, your total enjoyment of food just goes right out the door. You get a cold, the food tastes tasteless and this enjoyment of food is absolutely fundamental.
That thing that you said about eating with other people, eating is I'm going to throw this at Tracy, eating is a very social act, isn't it?
Oh, it's incredibly social. We have something that we refer to as commensality, and it's the bringing of people together around the food. The food becomes the anchor, and you get more pleasure out of eating the food by sharing it with others. It's just absolutely integral to our experience of eating. And it's really one of the things that makes us different than animals. Animals, for example, feed, whereas humans eat. And it's that social element of it that turns feeding into eating.
There is also, though, Tracy, I'm going to leave this with you, a lot of politics around food, the availability of food, the economics of food. We'll get into this in quite a lot of detail, but eating as well as social is political.
Oh, food is incredibly political. Every decision you make about what you eat is a political decision. And I often tell my students, if you really want to control the world, control the food, because that's the one thing that all of us have to do. We have to eat and we have to drink. And if you control the production and the supply of that, you in fact control the world. So every decision we make feeds into that global system of food production and distribution.
There has been an evolution, though, hasn't there, Karen, of eating for fuel, for sustenance. Someone was telling me a story the other day about their parents' cookbook their parents had, which had a recipe for cabbage, which was just boil the cabbage for 2 hours, which I feel like probably took all the nutrients out of the cabbage.
Old cookbook.
But it was, yes, exactly. But so it wasn't, it's always been for enjoyment. People have always had enjoyment, but there was always a lot of sustenance to it as well. Has there been an evolution of that leading up to where we are now?
You know, I think what is really interesting is that if we had to just eat for fuel, we'd be in a lot better shape from a health perspective. And just going back to what Tracy said earlier about the social aspect of food and animals feeding and humans eating, I've never really thought about that. But
likewise.
just thinking about that now, look at the state of animals. They're in good shape. Look at the state of humans. We're in not such good shape. And I think if we fed on fuel, we'd probably be better, because our social setting around eating, while it's great, it's also our undoing for a lot of people who've got health goals, and they are around food in a sometimes a very toxic environment that gets problematic. So I think the whole fuel versus other, there's lots to say about that, definitely.
Well, so can you tell me, and I think I know the answer to this, what is the ideal diet?
Oh my God. How long have we got?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Look, summarising it in a couple of sentences, I'll have to say that the current guidelines are based upon a diet which is predominantly carbohydrate, healthy whole grains, fruit and vegetables, moderate protein, low-ish fat with a low saturated fat emphasis. I'm one of those people in a group that thinks that we've got it all wrong. You might just look at our health statistics and agree, or you might say, no, it's just because people aren't sticking to those guidelines and they're eating fast food. I think the ideal diet is a diet that is based on whole food. If you truly eat whole unprocessed foods, you're likely to eat a lower amount of total carbohydrate and better quality carbohydrate, and you're likely to have a higher, healthier fat intake. So we will go on fighting about the optimal amount of carbohydrate and the optimal amount of fat, but I think something that we all agree on, how it plays out is a little bit differently, but something that we all agree on is that sugar and processed carbs are nasty, and we need to focus on eating whole unprocessed foods.
One of the things I find quite interesting is some countries with their food pyramids, I'll use the term loosely, have moved towards including the social aspect of eating. Yeah, because I think that's something that we've lost with current food trends.
So the food pyramid that we know, on the bottom is fruits and vegetables and whole grains and blah blah blah, and at the top is junk food and sugar and all those things. So where does the social aspect fit in?
Right at the base of it.
Right.
That we're not meant to eat alone. We're not meant to be sitting in a car stuffing a processed burger in our face as we drive down the motorway on our own. We're meant to be sitting around with people sharing and enjoying food and having that sociocultural element, and reconnecting with people over the food, because we've really lost that connection.
And actually, we shouldn't be sitting in our car even eating healthy food. We shouldn't be eating in our car. No. Number one, you need to focus on your driving. But number two, I think we've lost touch with actually eating and enjoying and savouring the tastes of food. So that sort of ties into that, social aspect.
I'd like to weigh in on the processed food and the fast food, some comments about the energy available in these foods. Now, the energy is, if you've got lots of sugar in it, plainly there's heaps of energy and so on. But more than that, if you care to look around all the fast food industries, without exception, all the foods are soft, S-O-F-T, soft.
So like soft mushy bread
in terms of texture. Yeah. In terms of texture. And it's the available energy. You can measure the carbs and the calories and what have you, the kilojoules in foods, but that's very, very blunt chemistry, because you realize you've got to chew it, you've got to digest it. And I can wolf down a McDonald's or a Wendy's, bang, like that. It's gone. And the amount of energy you get out of that is way, way higher, or is higher than you would actually get out of what Karen was saying about less processed foods. So it's a question of chopping the stuff up. In other words, the more it's finely divided and chopped up, and it can be reconstituted as a burger, you get much more energy out of it.
And we don't need that much energy.
Well, we don't, because you see it on the streets every day. It's not going to be ideal, that's for sure. But that's just a comment. And I'm not here to criticise the fast food industry. I'm just here to say that's, I think, reality.
I can criticise the fast food industry if you like.
You go for it. You go right ahead, Karen.
Well, let's come back to criticising the fast food industry. I want to come back to something Tracy said about the cultural aspects. And one of the things we're seeing in New Zealand now is we had it in the recording of the future of Auckland. Someone made the point that the great diversity of Auckland means that Auckland has the best takeaways. Her neighbourhood of Mount Roskill has the best takeaways because it's a really ethnically diverse neighbourhood. As well as the politics, the economics of food, there's also huge cultural aspects and different ways that different cultures eat.
Yes, there is big differences.
We discussed this earlier.
Yeah.
You elaborate on your Pacifica one. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'll just go back to the roots of gastronomy when Berlat Savarin, the philosopher who really founded contemporary gastronomy, said, "Tell me what you eat, and I'll tell you who you are." And it goes from the biophysical aspect of the food that you consume makes you physically who you are, but it also tells so much about your cultural background and who your tribe is, so to speak, and who your tribe isn't. It's a marker of cultural identity. And it raises, to me, fascinating questions in terms of New Zealand cuisine, because Auckland is one of the most super diverse cities in the world. I believe it's fourth in terms of diversity. And that is now manifest through the food that's available. So what does that say about who we are?
We've had a couple of series about this recently, about the New Zealand takeaway probably until the last maybe 20 years was fish and chips. The thing that we ate was fish and chips. Now it's ramen and it's dumplings and it's,
Kebabs.
Yeah, exactly. And it's really interesting when you ask people what New Zealand food is now, it really depends who you ask.
True, but if you drill down to each of those foods, kebabs, hamburgers, they've all generally got three things in common: the carbohydrate, the protein, and some vegetables in one form or another, to a greater or lesser extent, and more or less processed. So we're still eating the same food, but we're eating in a culturally, I agree, in a culturally absolutely different way.
Mm.
Yeah, well, I think, there's fast food. And actually, last night I popped into Farmers in the evening, actually, and went through that food court there, and I saw some sushi, and I saw some kebabs, and I looked at the price, and kebab was $10, and I was going home. My husband's away, so I was making my classic single dinner, which is halloumi cheese with a bunch of greens, and I worked out that actually that was going to be more expensive than the fast food. And I thought there are some fast foods that are actually okay. They really are. But there are other fast foods that, the typical chain that we all know, that it's just not okay. The quality of food, the amount of processing that goes in. And I know, moderation is a word I think we throw around too often. And if we truly had things in moderation, I'm sure we'd be fine. But we don't, and that's the reality of it. And you look at the populations that are represented in the health statistics. You look at Auckland, you've got South Auckland. Look at the placement of all the fast food places. Carl's Jr., the first one that came to New Zealand, it strategically was placed in South Auckland.
I got to say, I had a Carl's Jr. one. I was very impressed. Absolutely.
You're a shocker.
No, it was really, really good.
Impressed at the taste,
I was hungry at the time.
Right.
No,
But you can absolutely see, Tracy, how if you are feeding a family and you have a limited income, and to buy the fruits and the vegetables is expensive, to buy your halloumi and greens is more expensive than the local takeaway, people will have the thing that they know their kids will eat and that is cheap.
It's true, but this raises some interesting questions about the future of food. As I said, I was at the food show yesterday, and I've got to say the trend was turmeric. Everything was turmeric. I was expecting non-animal protein because this is the big thing overseas at the moment. And one of the interesting questions it raises is, can this be used as an effective tool into the future to deal with sustainability and health issues for broad swathes of the population? Because at the moment it's sort of considered an elite thing, these vegetable burgers that bleed, and maybe the vegetarians and the vegans will like them. But what if we get plant protein into the likes of McDonald's?
So it's kind of the mass market equivalent of sneaking vegetables into your kids' food. Yes,
and it addresses some non-communicable health issues, but it also addresses quite significant sustainability issues because we're moving away from animal-based protein and animal husbandry into agrarian practice around vegetables and plants to supply that part of the market.
But where I come from, I'm heavily involved in the meat industry. We see a huge demand for meat worldwide. So I'm not buying the fact that we're going to stop eating meat. I just don't see it. I mean, color me wrong later, but Owen, you were wrong. But right now, it's in flavour and taste and texture.
But if we can have the advances in technology that can make a vegetable protein taste like meat,
possibly, yes, indeed.
And have the same sort
will
of
it have the same
flame
nutritional
grilled
profile? Is the quality of the protein going to be the same? Certainly, soy protein is used sometimes. It's a meat substitute. It's the same. Well, yeah, well, our dog at the moment, for example, it's off any kind of soy products. The quality of the protein is not suiting her kidneys.
And when you look at the health of soy, like there's some question marks hanging over that as well. But I'd like to throw in what you mentioned, what you potentially mentioned, crickets, eating crickets.
And eating insects, yeah.
I mean, we already know that there's some countries in the world that do this. Not too long ago, I was sent a sample from some company with some cricket flour, and I did some analysis on the amino acid profile, which was just beautiful.
Yes, could be.
Absolutely beautiful. It is a strong flavour.
What a strong flavour?
Well, like a bitter, nutty flavour, and I think you have to mix it with other, if you wanted to get away from white flour and you wanted to cook a bread, which I did, I made a bread and I used the cricket flour and I put some almond flour with it, and it was delicious. But I certainly think that eating insects and, on a sustainability perspective, eating nose to tail, eating areas of the animal that we throw away at the moment, that should be, I don't know if it will be, but it should be the way of the future.
Just about the eating insects.
Mm-hmm.
When you think of prawns, people cheerfully eat they got an exoskeleton. It's fundamentally not very, very different from eating a cricket. I was at a restaurant also in Victoria very recently, and it was Aboriginal foods. And it was ice cream at the end with ants in it, black ants. So paid good money to eat black ants. They're quite crunchy little fellows, but I don't really.
Well, in fact, I was listening to a podcast the other day where they ate the BBC Infinite Monkey Cage podcast, and they ate insects. They were talking about this, and they ate insects. And in fact, they told the audience who were also surrounding it, "Do not eat this if you're allergic to shellfish," because
it could have the similar allergy effects. Yeah.
So they're not that.
No, not that different from what we are. We're quite used to eating that.
It's all about perceptions. Why is eating prawns okay, but eating crickets not?
Exactly.
It's culture-bound concepts.
Yes.
Yes. Why do we love dogs, wear cows, and eat pigs? They are culture-bound concepts because some cultures and some religions do not eat pork or beef. Yeah. Some cultures eat dogs. I'd be absolutely horrified to think that I'm going to eat my Labradors. Yeah. But that's because I'm a Western European woman living in New Zealand who has cute Labradors.
And then there's horse.
Yes, there's
France,
horse.
it's everywhere.
Yeah. And I guess the chips in the world are fried in horse fat.
Yeah, and the vegetarian-vegan argument, they have their own arguments because of, cruelty to animals and all that kind of stuff. Humanitarian.
And sustainability and all those things. Your bread, Karen, how long did it take you to make your cricket and almond flour bread?
Oh, just the same amount, like threw a few things together. Probably took about 5 minutes to bash together, throw it in the oven, 25 minutes, done.
Cool.
Low carbohydrate bread.
Because one of the things about sort of cooking and home cooking, and especially sustainable cooking and growing your own vegetables, all those sorts of things. One of the Facebook comments we get all the time as Radio New Zealand is whenever we talk about diet or nutrition, people always say, well, just grow your own. And I always think, who has the time to do that?
Well, perhaps if they would stop watching their Netflix, they might find the time.
Or do them both at the same time.
Yeah. But then this just wind back to the cost of vegetables. I mean, you can go and buy in Pack and Save in Hamilton, you can buy a bag, 10 kilos of onions. Let's give the damn things away. It's hugly cheap.
Man cannot subsist on onions.
Well, no, that's just one part of it. And a cabbage. I mean, I know there's 101 ways with cabbage, and it's more difficult and many of us lack the cooking skills. And you can elaborate on that, please.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think talking about the cost is sort of an easy opting out in terms of nutrition. Mm-hmm. It's really, to me, very much around food literacy, that we've lost these fundamental skills and abilities. I mean, kids don't take home economics, as it was called when I was at school, or food science. And we're into second, third generation where people simply don't know how to cook. And I'm talking about very fundamental cooking, like boiling pasta. Yeah. People don't actually know what to do with it. And so they go to the shops and they buy something that's pre-prepared, or they go to the takeaway simply because they lack the skills.
They lack the skills.
Yeah.
And they also lack the skills to budget properly. So there's a term called food insecurity. And I think, that's a very real thing for a lot of people. But I think for a certain part of that population, it should be food priorities. Because there is a spend on certain things that are discretionary, and some people think that food is discretionary, and it shouldn't be. I guess that's where the priority comes in. So, knowing how to budget, knowing how to cook, those two fundamentals, we're losing touch.
We absolutely are.
I'm going to ask you a question that we had just before we started recording. You announced, controversially, that it's okay to skip breakfast occasionally, which is against everything I've ever heard about how you should eat, that breakfast was the most important meal of the day, blah, 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 blah.
Well, I can weigh in on that one. The French don't think so. I mean, the typical French breakfast is a coffee, and a bread roll. And dinner, déjeuner, the middle of the day, traditionally was the most important meal. It's a bit like you need 8 glasses of water a day. Hello, where'd that come from?
No evidence behind that.
Just another beat up.
I'll have to say, most of what I do nowadays with nutrition goes against everything that I've ever learned. So I'm not actually particularly worried when I come across something and it's different to what the dogma has taught me. I'm beginning to realise that the whole breakfast is the most important meal of the day is an industry pushed message, and so is you've got to eat every 2 to 3 hours. Absolutely not. We don't need to eat every 2 to 3 hours at all. In the old days, there was not food to be eaten every 2 to 3 hours, and we've survived perfectly well as a species. So, just bringing in, the academic side of things is not enormous. There is a growing body of literature coming through showing that fasting or eating in restricted time windows can be particularly beneficial for so many different conditions and potentially protective against certain nasty conditions. And I think it's something that we need to look at more. It does, I've got a practice, and I do this with my clients, and I self-experiment because I think that's what you have to do. And it really forces you to look at your relationship with food. It's really interesting.
In terms of the 2 or 3 hours of eating it in that sort of way, the other what's the word for it? Ideas chucked around that every meal has to be balanced. Hello, that's a balanced lunch. You got a bit of apple and a bit of this and that, and there's no sugar and what have you, and the kid's happy. No, the kid's not happy. In the old days, when you slaughtered an animal, in the old days, eons ago, you didn't sit around and say after an hour, okay, guys, stop eating. We need some carbohydrates now. No, you ate the damn lot. And this gets back to your feast and famine in the Pacifica. Can you elaborate on that one? That was a fascinating story.
Oh, while we were waiting to come into the studio, we were just talking about cultural aspects of food. And Owen raised a question around body composition and Pacific people, and had suggested that one potential theory was because they were navigators and voyagers, that it was in their best interest to feed quite heavily when they were traveling because they never knew where the next meal was coming from. And I said that the way that I had looked at it was a slight variation of that particularly within the Pacific Islands, which are very vulnerable to natural events, that it was almost a feast and famine situation, that although food is quite abundant in the islands, it needs a cyclone, which within 24 hours just clears out all of the food. So in an intergenerational survival capacity, it was in the best interest to eat when you can and bulk up, because you never know where the next meal is really going to come from and how long it's going to be there for. And that this eventually evolved into and Karen popped in at this stage, and we were talking about a cultural appreciation for a larger body mass, because it represents that ability to survive and for women in particular, the intergenerational reproduction, which is the survival of the entire society. So you can see how there's both physiological and cultural reasons for a particular body type to evolve over time.
And then I threw in, is there a genetic component to this? And you said, possibly.
That wonderful academic response to
possibly.
everything, possibly, or it depends. Yeah.
Debatable.
Debatable, yeah.
Yeah, but certainly, surely, if you're, don't we know that if your parents are overweight or obese, you are much more likely to be? Is that true?
But that can be genetic or it can be sociocultural, because it's been pointed out on many occasions that a lot of overweight people have obese pets, and you could hardly say that that's genetic.
Yeah.
But you can see how
I've seen that too.
the it depends thing. This is if someone's not coming to your practice, Karen, and actually working with you with their life and their body and their particular health needs, if what you're reading is the headline on the website or Gwyneth Paltrow or any of those things, you can see how for people this is confusing because there's so many conflicting messages about what's good for you and what's not good for you.
Totally. I had a class with my students just before I came here, and I was saying that the consumer is in a tough position at the moment. There is a lot of confusion going on, but amidst the confusion there is also very different ways that we access information these days. So the internet is available to just about everyone, and you're getting the informed consumer and self-experimentation, and people are, when they realize some system is not working for them, they read stuff, they try stuff, and they figure it out for themselves. And if they need help, they ask for it. It's difficult for people who don't prioritize health, and we rely on the government to step in and tell us how to do that. But as a result, we've had things like the Pick the Tick National Heart Foundation food guidance system, which they've just abandoned because they've realized that it's nonsense because it never included sugar. We've got the health star rating, which is nonsense for a whole lot of other reasons. Yeah. But people are going to the supermarket going, I need to be guided. This is what I'll buy, and it's going to end badly.
5+ a day, is that still a reasonable thing?
It is. I think it's probably one of the only ones.
But isn't 5+ a day? Isn't it in the UK? Isn't it 8+ a day, or some different
varies,
number?
It varies internationally.
Internationally, and how much you're going to serve.
Yeah. We talked about home economics and the ability, people's knowledge of this. One of the other things I talked to someone recently is people not knowing where their food comes from. So an entire generation of people who have never seen a farm or who have never been fishing or any of that.
This isn't unique to this period. In the Industrial Revolution, that's when we saw the separation of food production in the cities, and the fear of what they'd done to my food was around then. That was even pasteurisation of milk. That if you get the word today about irradiation of food and you scratch out the word irradiation and you put in pasteurisation, you could take yourself back, time of Pasteur, to say that was the same suspicion. Exactly the same. Yeah. So there is that. So it's not just a recent phenomenon.
Would is part of the way of the future to connect people to where their food comes from?
Well, I can tell you from the meat industry that is a major concern at the moment, to be able to say this food came from that farm. But of course, between the production and the consumer, there's a lot of error, a lot of possibility for fraud, counterfeit, and so on. But there are ways to do it. And that's one of the objectives of that particular industry. And I'm suspecting for other industries as well. Provenance is the word we're after here. Provenance.
I mean, so there's bespoke meat suppliers that will show you the actual cow that your steak came from.
Because some people don't want to see that.
No, that's quite gruesome.
So I think the general picture of a happy family is more appealing.
Yes.
But no, that's an absolute focus for food industry now to connect in a convincing and a believable way. Yes. Have faith that you're eating what you claim to be eating.
You mentioned turmeric. The food term, was that turmeric lattes and all that sort of thing?
All of the above.
Yeah. And so, and is it being sold as a health product or a flavour product or Both.
A bit of both. I'd say the trend, at least at the food show, was that it's being pushed as a health product as opposed to a flavor product, though I have to admit my favorite turmeric product that I saw and that I brought home with me was turmeric ghee, and that was around both the flavor and the health properties.
My understanding of turmeric is that the driver for this is the Indian Avadura. I never get the pronunciation right.
Ayurvedic.
That's the one. But the idea is that the bladder cancer, for example, is very, very low incidence in India, and it's been attributed to turmeric. And I think that is now sort of translated into, if you want to live forever, you need some turmeric.
Those are correlation-based studies.
Yeah, correlation-based study. I mean, you probably might die of something else in the meantime, but
Yeah.
I
mean,
that seems to be
turmeric
the driver.
Yeah, turmeric from my understanding is from an anti-inflammatory perspective, and there's some good research coming through to show that. But the reality is, and this is again where the research and the practice get a little bit muddled, you do need a certain amount of active turmeric, and typically it's bioavailable with black pepper. So I'm not sure if the turmeric latte would have the black pepper in, but I think some of these this is where the absolute trend takes over. Someone hears the word turmeric, and then there's turmeric and everything, and people buy it, and that's a trend. Whether it's actually doing any therapeutic good is largely questionable.
And this is also where the pseudoscience comes in.
Well, also what you can show in a test tube, in vitro, as they say in chemistry, what you can show in a test tube, when you put it into the body, along with 1,001 other things going on, what's going to happen? You just don't know.
I was just going to say a good example of that was kava a few years ago. In the States, they started selling it in capsule form as a relaxant. And lo and behold, they found that it was causing some, I think it was liver damage or kidney damage in some of the people taking it. And so they pulled it off of the market. And kava's been used in the Pacific for centuries. But no one takes it in a tablet or a capsule.
Context.
It's the context. And there's sociocultural rules around the consumption of it. You don't just go into your bedroom and pop a couple of these things with a glass of water.
It's not at all.
As I understand, you turn your back to the audience to drink your kava.
And someone doles it out. And if you're having a bit too
and there's
much,
a ceremony about mixing
that's
it.
Right. That's right. And that we're starting to see this with the turmeric, because it ranges all the way from the turmeric lattes, which a lot of them do have pepper in them.
Oh, good.
To turmeric capsules, which defeats the entire purpose. And it is this sort of pop pseudoscience where people think, well, it worked in this culture, so it must be good for me, so I'll pop down to the health food shop and buy a bottle of it.
Is it going to be possible? We're going to finish with this question, and I'm going to start with you, Owen. Is it possible for science to produce us the perfect food? So it has good nutritional value, it's tasty, it has all the texture things that we like. We can eat it as part of a group, it fills us up, and it isn't bad for us.
No.
Oh, sweet. Okay, that was easy. Karen?
We have eggs, don't we?
Excellent. Another short, good answer. Tracy, you can answer that question, but also, would we want that?
Personally, I wouldn't. I think diversity, and I hate to use a bit of a cliche, is the spice of life. And I think that that's actually a very good thing.
My thanks to Professor Owen Young, Dr. Karen Zinn and Dr. Tracy Burno. Great Ideas is made in collaboration with AUT. Our sound engineer was Rangi Powick and our executive producer is Tim Watkin. You can find more great RNZ podcasts at rnz.co.nz on iTunes, Spotify or wherever you get your whatever you're hungry for.